Happy to have on the Illini Inquirer podcast help us preview Virginia, a team Illinois familiar with, but a new look team. It's Jacquie Franciulli, who covers Virginia for 24/7 Sports at Wahoo's 24/7. Jacquie, thanks for joining us, and just start us off by, wow, a lot of changes for a team that we saw last year as like world beaters. But take me through all the changes that happened in the offseason for them.
Yeah, who would have thought 1 year later Bronco Mendenhall would not be on the sidelines when these two teams face off each other? I know I didn't think he would be gone. I think no one did. Yeah, that was obviously the big change where we have a new head coach at Virginia, Tony Elliott, take over the reins. Now there are some familiar assistants on the sidelines with Clint Symptoms, Marcus Higgins, and also Coach 2J, the offensive line coach. So those staff members are still the same, and there's still a lot of the same personnel. So Illinois is facing a lot of the same team, especially on the offensive side of the ball. Apart from the O-line, you're facing Brennan Armstrong, you're facing Dontavian Wicks, you're facing Keaton Thompson, you're facing a lot of the same offensive playmakers like Billy Kemp. So you're seeing some of the same personnel on the offensive side of the ball, except the O-line. That's the big change. None of these guys who are playing on the O-line started in last year's team. A lot of those starters are either competing for jobs in the NFL or they're at other schools like Olu is currently at Michigan. So they had a lot of guys transfer out. They had no starters on the O-line. So this is a brand new offensive line. So this is where we're going to focus in on how UVA can progress through the schedule, is how well this O-line can do. The other change is with a new staff, you have new schemes. So the offense is going to look a little different too for Virginia. You're still going to have Brennan Armstrong doing Brennan Armstrong things, but he's also going to stay under center a little bit more. You're also going to see more of a run game for Virginia. So those are the big differences on that side of the ball. And then defensively, when you bring a guy from Air Force called Coach Radzinski, you're going to have more discipline on the defensive side of the ball, which they lacked last season. So you're going to see a little bit more fundamentally sound football. They're not quite there. It's only the second game of the season, but they're better at tackling, which is all UVA fans are grateful and thanking everyone possible that they're a better at tackling team. So those are the big differences just right off the bat of what you expect if you're Illinois watching this Virginia team.
Last week, Jacquie, we were trying to figure out what can we take from Illinois beating Wyoming, who I don't think is very good this year, which is different for them. But it was hard to extrapolate much, right? So what do you feel like you can take from them beating Richmond, an FCS team, 34-17?
Well, when you look at that, you can see that the O-line actually looked like they were gelling. Now, I'm not saying that they're fantastic, they're technically sound. That was not it. But you saw an offensive line that showed that they had some sort of experience, and an offensive line that kept Brennan Armstrong somewhat safe. Now, he still was hit, but a lot of that is when you look back on film, it was actually some back end issues. Maybe the running back went a little bit too quick and got off his block a little too quickly. So you're seeing that sort of communication issue. So when you look at a game against Richmond, offensively, you see the same weapons available for Brennan. You see that there is potential of a run game with Paris Jones, who's a very talented running back, a former walk-on who earned a scholarship over the last year. But you also saw some issues, some communication issues on the offensive side of the ball. That's one of the concerns is, again, they're still assimilating to the new offense. And there were some timing issues between Brennan and his wide receivers. The other thing that when you're looking at this offense is you're trying to see what's the future of this run game, because right now it looks like Paris Jones is more productive back. Who's going to be their number two? Last week, we saw Mike Collins come in number 2, but he wasn't consistent enough. And actually, if you look at his Pro Football Focus score on pass protection, he only got a 14.1. So he didn't have a great game on that side. So he wasn't an all-around good running back in that game. So Ronnie Walker and Cody Brown are 2 running backs not available for UVA last week that is available this week. So how does that change their running game approach? The other thing, defensively, we saw a secondary that's much more sound. Now, when Coach Rudd's defense is very different, they actually play 5 DBs in the back with 3 safeties. That's very different than when UVA played last year. Now, what I like about that is in the first half, we noticed that UVA struggled against the run again. But that was Josh Ahern was out for the first half because he had a targeting call at the end of the last season. So he had to not play for which is, I didn't know that was possible. But You learn something new every day with the NCAA and the ACC and all that stuff. But anyway, so he didn't play in the first half, but then he played in the second half. And what I like about this scheme for him is he's not great at pass protection going to coverage, but he's really good at stopping the run and going up and going into his gaps. So that was his strength. And because he has an extra safety behind him in coverage, he can do that, which is why they were so much better at stopping the run in the second half compared to the first, because he was playing. So we saw a really good combination of Josh Ahern and Nick Jackson, who Illinois fans should remember from last year. But what UVA is still struggling is in the pass rush. Now, to be fair, Richmond played that quick up-tempo offense, which they struggled with last season, and it seems they're still struggling a little bit now. But they didn't get that push that they need. That's something that they're going to have to do against Illinois, especially with how physical Illinois and most Big Ten teams are. So that's what we learned on the defensive side of the ball, is that they need more push up front, but it looks like the secondary and the problems that they had last year seems more sound, and they're a better tackling team. Actually, Tony Elliott jokes, like, I was actually pleasantly surprised at how good we tackled because I saw them during scrimmage. So apparently they had a good jump between their last scrimmage and the first game. So those are the biggest talking points for UVA after the game. But as you know, it's against a lesser opponent. So you're kind of weighing, like, they're not world beaters, but they're not as awful as you think. So you're just trying to kind of keep that balance.
Yeah. Well, Jackie, Brennan Armstrong, a lot of fans think of probably as a Heisman candidate, given what he did to them last year at 405 yards, 5 touchdowns. Saw him kind of do his running thing last week, the 64-yard touchdown. But of course, he's really talented, a lefty. Brett Bielema has mentioned that's hard to simulate when you don't have lefty throwers in practice. But also, he's got a talented group of wide receivers. I think Katon Thompson's breakout was against Illinois last year. He had a great game. And we know Wicks and Kemp have put up big numbers. What makes that crew so good altogether?
Well, they're playmakers. That's what it is they will get up and get you the ball, which is what they didn't do against Richmond. Actually, Dontavius Wicks had a fumble during that game, which is very unlike him and very uncharacteristic. I can't say uncharacteristics. I can't say it. Let's just ignore that one. So he just couldn't hold on to the ball and he fumbled it. There was a lot of drops in that wide receiver room, which isn't common for them. So, but when you see this wide receivers, when they're firing on all cylinders, when Brennan's able to throw them the ball, is that Dontavius Wicks, I mean, there's a t-shirt made of this. He gets you the catch, those impossible one-handed catches in the end zone. He's that athlete that can do that. Lavelle Davis, who Illinois fans did not see last year because he was hurt. He's back. He had a touchdown against Richmond. He had a breakout freshman year before he was hurt. He's one to watch. He's very, very, very talented. Those are the guys that can do the impossible catches where Brennan can look, see potential, throw the ball, maybe a little high, maybe a little bit behind, but they will make the play to catch it. When you have that weakened defensive line or an inexperienced defensive line and Brennan might not have enough time to throw, you need those wide receivers to make those catches. That's why whenever we had preseason talk, I always thought, yes, the O-line is weak, but if Brennan just has a smidge of time to find those wide receivers, they can make the play. You always, if you have those skill makers, you can hide the weaknesses in the O-line enough where you can give it time to gel. So that's what this wide receiver group can give you.
Well, defensively, I would imagine it's about, shutting down Chase Brown, right? Chase Brown, the best backs in the country so far this year, but really during the last year and a half after the Virginia game. But also this defense has changed a lot. I mean, after that Virginia game, Illinois' defensive coordinator changed their scheme a little bit, changed personnel a lot. So what was Tony Elliott's kind of keys to defeating Illinois, which is certainly a different team offensively and defensively than they saw last year, that Virginia players saw last year in Charlottesville?
Yeah, so he actually he had a lot of great things to say about Illinois during his press conference. He said that Illinois is going to be a motivated team. Not only did they lose a close one, but they want retribution for what happened in Charlottesville last season. And one thing that Tony Elliott was saying is they need to be physical in the trenches. He says this game is going to be won in the trenches. The D-line needs to use their hands well. They need to push up front. They need to control the run. They need to stop. They know they need to stop the run and force Illinois to throw the ball. They know this. They need to have, they need to put pressure on the quarterback, which they did not do against Richmond. They understand the side of the game plan. While on the offensive side of the ball, they know that Illinois likes to control the clock. So their offense has to do the same thing. They need to establish the run so they can stay on the field as much as possible so they can help out their defense when they're against the run so they don't get gassed or tired and also lose when it's this close of a game. Because I think Virginia, and I saw your prediction, and if you saw my prediction, I think everyone thinks it's going to be a close matchup. So holding on to the ball is going to be crucial for both of these teams, and also play sound and hold on to the ball. Virginia had 2 turnovers and 1 fumble recovery against Richmond. They can't afford any of those type of mistakes when you're dealing with a close game. So those are kind of the keys to the game for Virginia. And they know it's going to be a physical matchup. It's going to be a true test to see how far along that O-line has come. And honestly, to see how deep this D-line is. Through the preseason, we kept thinking that this D-line would be the strongest position depth-wise. They didn't show it that against Richmond. So this is going to be a true test to see if they can be the strongest unit on that defense.
Well, Jacquie, last one for you. I mean, Tony Elliott kind of was always mentioned as, could be a head coaching candidate. Well, Virginia gets him after Bronco Mendenhall surprisingly resigned. So what has been his stamp on the program so far? Just, I guess, overall wise. And then what does this game mean for him and his program in the first year here?
Well, Tony Elliott, since he's arrived, he wants to build what he calls a model program. He wants to build a program that not only produces good football programs, championship program, but he also wants to talk about producing championship men. So his thought process is he's kind of going into that UVA mindset of academics and trying to push that kind of not be. And I don't want to say be Stanford-like because that Stanford has its own thing, but I mean, that's sort of the message, is trying to kind of push that academic side of it, as well as saying like, hey, we can have good football. There's going to be new facilities that has just broken ground, pushing that. He's really pushing nutrition, kind of changing the culture within the program. He's a very analytical guy. He really thinks things through. He's an engineering degree, so his mind is kind of going step by step and really analyzing everything. So when their new facilities was being built, he looked at the plan and says, we need to really capture the nutrition side. And they adapted the facility plan and added more nutrition to that group. And even talking to the players, that was a main focus in the off season, getting nutrition settled, helping these guys change their mindset about recovery, changing how they think of the process, being consistent, strain a little bit harder on certain things. That's something that UVA struggled last year. If you watched them play, they didn't play for all 4 quarters. So straining and continuing. So that's what he's doing on the football side of things. And when you look at this game and you look at Virginia's schedule in its entirety, the second half of the season is rough. Yes, they'll be home for a lot of it, but when you face Miami, North Carolina, Pitt, and Coastal Carolina, and then end the schedule at Virginia Tech, that's a harsh second half of the season. So when you look, I hate to say it's make or break. I really hate saying that. And it's one of the worst cliches in sports. But when you look at this schedule, if they lose any of these first games, it kind of puts a ticking clock on the rest of the season. At Illinois is a big game to kind of show you the trajectory of this program and also trajectory of how this season's going to look, because after this, they'll be home to Old Dominion, who happened just to beat in-state rival Virginia Tech last week. And then they face at Syracuse for a Friday night game, which they face their old offensive coordinator and old quarterbacks coach. So that's going to be a big ACC rival game. Then they go at Duke and they have Louisville at home. That is a good schedule to start with. But if you stumble, that second half looks more daunting.
Jacquie Franciulli, check out all her great work. Get to know Virginia a little bit more over there. Wahoo's 24/7. Jacquie, thank you so much. Enjoy the game. See you at the game.
Thank you so much.